Have you ever noticed that the more intensely you need something, the more it seems to vanish from your grasp? It's a quiet, haunting experience. You wait for a reply that never comes. You hope for recognition that stays just out of reach. You long for a connection that feels perpetually one step ahead. This isn't a punishment. It's not a sign you're unworthy. It is, however, a precise reflection of an invisible signal you are transmitting. You attract not through your conscious thoughts, but through your unconscious frequency. And a frequency born of need, of absence, will always push away the very thing it seeks. This isn't about desire, it's about resonance. Only when you cease reaching from a place of emptiness do you return to your center. There, you no longer attract, you emanate. 1. The unseen resonance field. Some presences shift a space without uttering a word. A person enters a room, and the atmosphere itself seems to settle, to turn toward them. Others, despite their best efforts, leave a subtle weight in the air, a faint dissonance that others feel but cannot name. This communication happens beneath language. It is the resonance field of a person, and this field is always truthful. Carl Jung might not have used the term vibration, but he understood profoundly that the psyche, conscious and unconscious, is a living, magnetic entity. When you emit a frequency sourced in lack, from a well of craving and anxiety, you broadcast a silent message. I am incomplete. I am afraid. I am not enough as I am. And life, along with the people in it, responds not to your words, but to this foundational signal. In Jung's framework, every longing that springs from a wounded sense of self activates what he termed the shadow. The shadow isn't merely your darkness. It is everything within you that you disown, reject, or refuse to acknowledge. When you seek love from a terror of solitude, you are pursuing from the shadow belief that you cannot be whole alone. When you chase success to fill a void of worth, you are acting from an internal fracture, not authentic purpose. Jung called this projection, the unconscious act of casting our unintegrated parts onto the external world. In his work, he observed that these projections transform reality into a mirror of our own unrecognized inner landscape. The world doesn't reflect objective truth first. It mirrors the unseen wounds within us. Picture this. You start a new relationship. On the surface, you are engaged, cheerful, independent. But internally, you are monitoring every interaction. You analyze response times, read meaning into silences, craft narratives in the pauses. This is the resonance of lack. Even if your words are light, this energy radiates. The other person perceives it, not through your sentences, but through the subtle tension in your presence, the unspoken urgency, the quiet between your words. They may withdraw, not from a lack of care, but from an intuitive reluctance to become the source that fills a void they did not create. Jung famously stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Until you confront the true engine beneath your actions, you will be guided by it, misnaming it as destiny." Many attempt to manifest their wants. They visualize, they affirm, they catalog their dreams. Yet they overlook the central mechanism. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. If your core frequency emits fear, scarcity, or self-doubt, you are broadcasting a clear, coherent signal. I do not have this. I am not enough for this. And by the law of resonant match, you will draw to you experiences that confirm that very reality. Indifference, missed chances, relationships that echo your own uncertainty. Jung drew a critical distinction between the ego and the self. The ego is the part that strives to manage, to acquire, to prove, and to secure. The self, in contrast, is the totality of your being, already complete. When you operate from ego, you feel a constant pressure to do, to be chosen, to be validated, to avoid loss. But when you begin to live from the self, the compulsion to pursue softens because you recognize, I am already here. What is authentic and meant for you will not require force. It will resonate with the wholeness you embody. Jung suggested that the soul requires your honesty, not your compliance to external expectations. It asks not for you to contort yourself to be pleasing, but for the courage to align with your own inner truth. Frequencies of lack are ultimately frequencies of fear, of abandonment, of old hurts, of a younger self still waiting for an external voice to whisper, "You are complete." But no external person can deliver this if you have not first generated this signal from within. As Jung put it, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. The search can end. What you seek is not in front of you. It is in the quality of presence you bring to this very moment. And if you can shift that frequency from pleading to groundedness, from anticipation to serenity, from anxiety to trust, you will stop chasing. What belongs to you will find you. Not because you performed correctly, but because you have become a match for it. 2. The story of Elena. And this is the potent truth Jung invites us to grasp. You attract by your state of being, not by your wish list. When your internal energy continually broadcasts a signal of need, of waiting, of fear, your external reality will unfailingly serve as a mirror to that frequency. To see this not as theory, but as lived experience, consider the story of Elena, a clear example of what Jung might call a psychic echo louder than words. Elena was a capable, insightful woman, highly self-aware. At 32, she navigated the end of a significant relationship that had defined her world. In the aftermath, she did not avoid the pain. She embarked on what appeared to be a textbook journey of healing. She read, meditated, kept journals, attended workshops, practiced self-care, and rebuilt her life. Externally, Elena seemed the portrait of a person who had transcended her past. Yet a pattern persisted she couldn't decipher. Each new connection, however promising at the start, would eventually drift into familiar territory. The other person would become distant. The bond would grow fragile, dissolving without any concrete explanation. The clarity arrived not through more analysis, but in a moment of piercing insight during a therapy session. Her therapist observed gently, "Your energy isn't open to love. It is petitioning for proof." That statement landed at the core of everything Elena's healing had missed. She had not truly released the old story. She had done everything to prove she was worthy of love. While her exterior had transformed, her inner resonance still clung, not to a specific person, but to a pattern. The one who will finally heal me. The one who will confirm I am enough. Elena was not present in her new connections. She was living inside an unconscious expectation. This time, someone will act differently, so I can finally feel I have succeeded at love. She was not loving. She was waiting to be redeemed. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness Elena needed to face was not her past partner or her old pain, but the unconscious belief that she could not be whole unless selected by another. This explains why all her positive actions were still fueled by a petitioning energy. It was not genuine autonomy. It was disguised control, a silent bargain of, "I will love myself, provided someone else confirms I am lovable." But resonance does not negotiate. Your field doesn't care about the checklist you've completed. It only transmits the signal of who you genuinely believe yourself to be. And so, Elena's reality kept reflecting one lesson. When you demand confirmation, you emit the frequency of, "I am not enough." And the universe, as Jung implied, does not answer your resume. It answers your essence. The privilege of a lifetime, he said, is to become who you truly are. But if you still require another to confirm it, you remain a silhouette seeking its shape. After that session, Elena didn't change her tactics for being loved. She changed her point of origin. She didn't force herself to feel nothing. She began to witness her impulses when meeting someone new. Each time she noticed herself expecting too soon, she wouldn't judge, but would inquire softly, "Am I appreciating this person? Or am I waiting for them to tell me I'm complete?" This self-observation was the turning point of her resonance. Not loving less, not moving slower, but loving from a place of inherent fullness. From that point, her energy no longer broadcast a petition. She was no longer on the frequency of, "Choose me so I can be me." She had chosen herself. And when one chooses oneself, the world ceases to be a place from which to seek salvation and becomes a space in which to live, to share, to shine. No pursuit, no waiting, no proving. Simply being present. Because, as Jung reflected, perhaps the most daunting task is to accept oneself completely. And when you do, you no longer need anyone to confirm a thing. You become a field of wholeness where no signal of lack resides. And that is why everything you ever sought begins to find its way to you. 3. The inner mechanism and Jung's map. When Elena stopped demanding external confirmation, she didn't just transform her approach to love, she stepped into a deeper layer of understanding. She encountered the inner mechanism that truly governs our lives. Because all of our experiences, connections, disappointments, recurring emotional loops, stem from the psychological resonance field emitted from the deepest strata of the self. In analytical psychology, Jung clearly distinguished between desire born of the ego and the call of the self. When the ego yearns for something not from abundance but from emptiness, it unconsciously activates the unhealed, unintegrated portions of the psyche, the shadow. These fragments don't disappear because you think more positively. In fact, the more they are suppressed, the more they influence the energy you emit. The more you strain to become what you are not, the more you become a portrait of your own opposite. Not because you are false, but because you haven't faced the origin of the desire, which is absence. Pause for a moment. Reflect on your own experience. Have you ever entered a conversation and sensed a dissonance in someone, even while they smiled? Have you ever heard someone declare they've moved on, yet felt a quiet sorrow emanating from them? This is the phenomenon of resonant perception. Not mystical, but a tangible frequency arising from a psychological structure. Jung proposed that consciousness is not merely words and thoughts, but emotionally charged images, pictures accumulated in the unconscious and broadcast outward like a signal. He wrote that the psyche is fundamentally imagistic. It is a self-regulating system that expresses itself in symbolic forms. This explains why, even if you say, "I'm fine, I've let go," or "I feel confident," others will still sense the truth if your internal resonance is shaky. The ego can lie, but your energy cannot. The danger emerges when the ego acts from fear, but dresses it in a positive label. "I'm just trying," or "This is just care." Then the shadow gains true potency. Jung cautioned that acknowledging the shadow is a moral problem, central to the process of individuation. Only when you dare to observe the frequency arising from control, fear, or insecurity do you begin the journey of individuation, a return to the whole self, where no part requires concealment. Individuation, in Jung's vision, isn't about building a better you. It is about returning to the center of your being, where all inner fragments are witnessed and reintegrated. When you emit a resonance born of lack, you operate from the unhealed ego. But when you live from the center, from the self, you no longer require control, persuasion, or pursuit. You simply abide in inner richness. Then you cease transmitting, "Come to me so I can feel complete." You emit a silent, steady field. "I am myself, and I am sufficient." Are you living from the core of your being, or are you broadcasting a signal that begs others to affirm your worth? Share in the comments. because that awareness is the first, essential step in altering the resonance you carry. There is a subtle reality Jung recognized early. People are not drawn to you for what you do. They are pulled by the energy field you don't realize you are projecting. If that field issues from unintegrated shadows, you will attract individuals who activate your wounds, not to punish you, but to invite you to look more deeply at what pleads for healing. Jung wrote that the self is both the center and the entire circumference encompassing both consciousness and the unconscious. It is the totality that holds both your light and your darkness. So if you've ever wondered why you encounter similar relational patterns, or why you feel misunderstood despite your efforts, the answer may reside in the frequency you emit, not in your thoughts about yourself. Only when you dare to turn inward, not to fix, but to integrate every part, do you enter the state Jung termed the wholeness of the self. A state where you no longer need to send a pleading signal because you are transmitting truth. Are you prepared to return to your own center? If so, comment a single word: here. Being fully here is what makes your resonance magnetic. No seeking required, and yet you will attract all that genuinely harmonizes with you. 4. The story of Miriam. Understanding how energy emitted from a wounded ego can unconsciously attract repetitive experiences leads us to a more crucial truth. Intellectual understanding is not liberation. The mind can declare, "I have released this." But if the resonance within still transmits a signal of attachment, you remain on the same frequency, and the world will continue to mirror it, regardless of books read, videos watched, or proclamations made. Miriam's story offers a poignant illustration. Miriam, now in her late 30s, is a resilient, introspective woman who survived a relationship that depleted her spirit. After it ended, she committed to rebuilding herself. She studied self-compassion, engaged in therapy, practiced mindfulness, wrote extensively, and even began sharing insights online. Everyone around her saw a woman who had conquered her pain, and Miriam believed it too. She felt steady, at peace, open to new connection, until she met someone. Initially, Miriam maintained her equilibrium, but within days, she found herself checking her device more frequently, parsing each text, interpreting his silence. When he was quiet a bit longer, a wave of unease would rise. She didn't voice it or act out, but her mind would spiral. What does this mean? Did I err? Is this the old pattern returning? In a pivotal therapy hour, her therapist noted quietly, "Your mind has released, but your nervous system is still holding on." Miriam was stunned. She hadn't considered she could be deceiving herself. The truth was, all her efforts, the meditation, the sharing, the writing, sprang from a drive not to be that hurt person again, to guarantee a different outcome. Deep down, her energy still transmitted the old message. "I need something external to make me feel secure, to ensure I won't be wounded again." Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Miriam wasn't wrong to believe she'd let go. She simply hadn't reached the end of her own truth. Her deepest apprehension was still quietly directing her resonance. Unprocessed energy behaves like a recurring script. You change the actors, the setting, the dialogue, yet you draw experiences with the same core theme: abandonment, misunderstanding, insufficiency. Jung termed this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to recreate an unresolved experience until it is integrated. He noted that healing occurs only when we dare to face unconscious material and weave it into the fabric of our whole being. The fact is, your resonance always speaks before your lips move. Others don't withdraw because you lack a specific trait, but because they unconsciously sense an energy field that asks to be filled. They feel a weight you may not recognize you carry. Miriam never uttered a single plea, yet her field broadcast a clear request. "Give me certainty. Assure me I won't be hurt." When that energy emerges, love cannot flow freely. It becomes distorted, burdened with a responsibility to heal that only you can bear. If you find yourself asking, "Why do I keep attracting similar dynamics?" Perhaps it's time to pause the external inquiry and listen inward. Ask, what am I emitting that I haven't yet acknowledged? Connection cannot thrive on a foundation of energy bent by fear. The more you seek safety in another, the further you drift from your center. And the world, as Jung suggested, responds not to your wants, but to your state of being. Until you alter that fundamental frequency, you will star in the same essential story with different costumes. The hopeful news is this: the moment you begin to recognize this, as Miriam did, you have already initiated a shift in your resonance. And that recognition alone, without any external validation, is powerful enough to transform your entire narrative. 5. Between control and surrender. Imagine this moment. You set your phone down, resolved not to message again. You're fine. Minutes later, your hand reaches for it almost automatically, awaiting a notification, a sign that you are still considered, still valued. On the surface, you narrate this as letting go. Internally, your entire system is on alert. That isn't peace. That is control masquerading as stillness. At this crossroads between mature behavior and lingering attachment energy lies a difficult, transformative lesson. Control is not strength. It is a survival reflex of an unhealed ego. Miriam recognized this not intellectually, but by feeling it in her body, in her energy, in her response to uncertainty. That recognition opens the door to the core distinction between control and authentic surrender. We often mistake control for power, for taking action to ensure nothing falls apart. In reality, control is a contraction of awareness. It is fear wrapped in the clothing of rationality. It is the ego attempting to manage the unknown through analysis, speculation, intervention, and sometimes performative indifference. Jung taught that the ego seeks to control what the soul has not yet integrated. This veneer of logic makes control a subtle wound. You aren't acting from strength, you're acting from fear, unwilling to name it. Consider beginning a new relationship. The other person communicates less for a day. You feel a compulsion to do something. Do you message first to regain footing? Do you stay silent as a test? Do you ask indirect questions to gauge their state? None of these actions are inherently wrong, but examine the interior condition driving them. If it stems from an inability to abide in uncertainty, then you are not connecting, you are controlling. Jung spoke to the motive beneath the behavior. He wrote that when an inner situation remains unconscious, it manifests outwardly as fate. If you fail to see that you are being governed by a fear of losing control, you will continue to attract scenarios that demand you control, until you either exhaust yourself or awaken. You either live from your center, or you operate from the fear of being left. Recognizing this is the first step toward release, a letting go born of awareness, not fatigue. Surrender is not passive waiting. Surrender is the most robust act of a psyche at rest within itself. It is when you no longer need to force reality to conform to an egoic script. It is when you cease checking, steering, or editing the moment, because you trust that what belongs to you will arrive without manipulation, and what does not will only cause pain if clutched. A clear illustration is the journey of Clara. When she entered a new relationship, initial harmony gradually gave way to subtle tension. Each time her partner grew quiet, Clara began analyzing subtext, reading into pauses. She didn't accuse or complain outwardly, yet internally, she was quietly applying pressure, both to herself and to him, with expectations and worry. Inevitably, the energy between them grew heavy. When she asked why, her partner could only express that something felt burdensome, without clear cause. Clara realized the issue wasn't her partner's behavior, but that she was operating from a place of control, disguised as a desire for understanding. Jung did not frame surrender as a mere technique. He presented it as a process of inner maturation. He suggested that surrender is not weakness, but the courage to cease waging war against your own nature. It is when you no longer require certainty to feel safe, another's reaction to feel loved, or control to shield yourself from abandonment. If you live in the energy of clinging to avoid loss, remember, control does not keep you safe. It only keeps you separate from genuine experience. Sometimes the most vital step is not knowing the next move, but daring to be still, to feel what you are clinging to out of fear rather than love. You may have seen yourself controlling under the guise of seeking reassurance that you are not alone. Now, you have another choice. If you're ready to step out of the energy of control and into a magnetic state where life arrives without being tugged, share the phrase, "I release," below. 6. The potency of presence. But surrender does not mean disappearance. Not controlling does not equate to passivity. This leads us to a dimension few fully comprehend, what Jung pointed to as the true core of an authentic life, the potency of presence. If control is action born of fear, presence is a state of holistic being. It does not arise from doing, but from an inner groundedness that asks nothing of the world. It is the energy that does not chase, defend, or seek affirmation. It simply abides. Resonant presence isn't measured by meditation minutes or practiced silence. It is the living energy field you emit when your mind, emotions, and body are no longer racing toward the future or recoiling into the past. It is when you are truly here, unoccupied by worry, anticipation, or hidden dread. Jung observed that our freedom extends only as far as the limits of our consciousness. If you are not fully present, you remain within the unconscious realm of reactivity, where your energy is a reaction, not a choice. Recall someone whose mere entrance into a space brought a sense of calm, safety, or vitality. They may not have been the most striking, talkative, or eager to impress, yet they arrived completely. That is the power of presence. No performance, no tactics, yet the entire atmosphere shifts. Because when you are present with yourself, you need nothing to make an impression. You are the impression. If you're still listening, pause for just 5 seconds. Put down whatever you're holding. Close your eyes. Notice, are you fully here with me? Or is your body stationary while your mind is elsewhere? This is a small test of presence. If you notice you weren't fully here, you're not alone. Presence doesn't come from intention alone. It comes through practice. Jung described the process of returning to the self, individuation, as a journey through layers of illusion, wounding, and unconscious reflexes, until what remains is unconditional presence. He wrote that the self is a supreme union of opposites. Only when you stop striving to become something smarter, more likable, or more independent, can you begin to be fully present as your complete, undivided being. Consider Daniel's story. For years, he cycled through a pattern. Meet someone new, feel excitement, then succumb to anxiety. He'd analyze messages, await reactions to feel secure. It left him exhausted. Then he made what he called a decision for radical stillness. He didn't withdraw from life. He withdrew from reaction. He ceased pursuing connection strategically. Each day, he simply practiced being present in his body, his breath, his heartbeat, the quiet, without forcing himself to feel better, only to show up more authentically. A week passed, then 2. Nothing dramatic occurred, but gradually, he noticed he felt turmoil when a reply didn't come. He no longer clung to minor shifts as lifelines. From that clarity, the connections that found him no longer followed old scripts. There was no tension, no struggle, because he was no longer attracting from lack, but from a magnetic field of grounded presence. You might ask, how do I attain that? The answer isn't a checklist. It lies in releasing the compulsion to do in order to become. Jung never taught self-improvement as machinery. He invited us to live fully as the self that already exists. He called it the privilege of a lifetime to become who you truly are. And that becoming doesn't come from chasing something new. It comes from pausing long enough to realize you have always been here. Just be present. If this resonates, leave a single word in the comments. Here. Not as a habit, but as a reminder to yourself that you once drifted from your core and are now returning. No more chasing. No more controlling. Just presence. From that place, everything begins to shift. Not because of what you do, but because you have finally become yourself. 7. Resonant detachment. Yet presence, though profound, doesn't arrive as a sudden gift. It is the result of an inner discipline, a willingness to cease reacting, to observe instead of control, to meet yourself in the silence you once rushed to fill. Presence cannot inhabit a mind governed by anxiety. This is where you must engage in a key Jungian practice, resonant detachment. Not to become cold, but to return to your whole self, undistracted by the hunger for external validation. Resonant detachment is not indifference or a lack of desire. It is the highest form of loyalty to yourself, a vow not to betray your wholeness to maintain an unhealthy connection. It begins by daring to notice the subtle signs you are pursuing from a frequency of lack. Not because you are weak, but because you've become accustomed to a dependent resonance. That resonance might speak through every message you send, every pause you interpret, every glance you hold. Have you felt unable to tolerate a moment of silence in a relationship? Each minute without a reply sending your mind into narratives, your imagination racing, your hand compelled to act, to send something, to ask, to check. That is not your true nature. That is the frequency of lack hijacking your system. Jung warned that an activated complex places us temporarily under the sway of an autonomous personality fragment. Our unhealed wound takes the wheel, while we believe we are acting rationally. Or perhaps you find you cannot bear not knowing what another thinks or feels. You require constant confirmation, reassurance, signs to feel steady. But that need doesn't arise from the present moment. It springs from a latent anxiety that has resided within you for a long time. If you notice you are easily triggered, unable to wait, always seeking explanations to calm your emotions, you are likely not loving, but communicating through the resonance of lack. And the world perceives it as a silent appeal for help, even if you never speak it. The pathway out of this invisible cycle lies not in more action, but in learning to pause the moment the impulse arises. The moment you feel compelled to send an unnecessary message. The moment you feel you must do something to hold a connection. Jung noted that within each of us resides an unknown self who speaks in dreams, showing us how differently it sees us from our own self-view. When you pause, you begin to listen to that deeper part, which needs no control, only presence. You can start with a small step. For the first 3 minutes of restlessness, do nothing. Just breathe. Don't touch your phone. Don't seek a distraction. Then, inquire gently. Do I want to act from presence or from fear? This is the practice of resonant detachment, choosing action from your quiet center, not from your anxiety. Create a daily space of silence, even 10 minutes, with no screens, no other voices, just you and your breath. In that space, softly state, I do not chase, I do not cling, I am present. You don't need to believe it instantly. Repeat it until the new resonance begins to imprint on your nervous system. And if you return to the old question, how can I be loved? Invert it. Ask instead, which part of me still does not believe it is worthy of love? Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Resonant detachment isn't about performing better. It's about daring to live more consciously, noticing what unfolds within, and choosing not to repeat the old pattern. Then, when you stop chasing, stop demanding, stop striving to be seen, a quiet miracle begins. You become what you once sought. You no longer transmit signals of absence. You no longer negotiate from fear. You no longer require another's understanding to feel valuable. You attract not by strategy, eloquent words, or perfected presentation. You attract by the authentic frequency of who you are. When you are fully present, no longer at war with yourself, you don't chase. You don't need to attract. You need only to abide in tune with your own resonance. True magnetism doesn't arise from effort. It emerges from clarity in your energy of being. When you cease pursuing, not merely in action, but in unconscious vibration, you no longer run toward what you want. You remain in your truth. And from that point of stillness, you emit an irresistible field, a silence rich with attraction, a state of ease that allows what doesn't belong to fall away, and what is right to find you. Therefore, you need not become someone else. You need only return to your own center. Let the stillness speak for you. Let your energy resonate before you enter a room. Let the wholeness within become the unspoken invitation the world cannot overlook. You no longer need to be chosen, because you have chosen yourself. And that is a resonance that cannot be refused. If these insights have resonated with a deeper part of your being, with the longing to live authentically, to be free, to heal from within, then don't leave just yet. Subscribe to continue this journey back to yourself, where you need not chase anything, because everything essential has always resided within you.